Hey guys, tonight we drift back into the ancient sands of Egypt, not for the usual pyramids and pharaohs tour, but to uncover something stranger. You're not here to marvel at obelisks or decode hieroglyphs. No, tonight you've wandered into a place where sleep itself is a dangerous act. The moment your eyelids sag, you're not seen as tired, you're seen as suspicious. And if you actually fall asleep, let's just say, you probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? And what time is it over there? Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge along the dusty edge of a Nile tributary. The air so dry it crackles in your nose. Papyrus reeds rustle behind you, whispering as if they're in on the secret. The sun hasn't even dipped below the horizon, yet everyone around you looks exhausted, and not the bad night's sleep kind of tired. No, this is deeper, the kind of weariness that comes from pretending to be awake for days on end. You pass a small boy who's been tied upright to a date, Porma's head drooping. A temple guard slaps his face with a wet cloth. Sleep is forgetfulness, the guard mutters, more to himself than to anyone else. And forgetfulness is treason. Welcome to a time when sleep wasn't sacred. It was criminal. The policy started gradually. Whispers in the court. A night guard who spotted a soldier snoring on duty. A vizier who claimed that dreams diluted obedience. Eventually, the pharaoh one of the later, though historians still argue whether it was the third or fourth, declared that true loyalty meant wakefulness. Sleep was for the spiritually lazy, the weak, the easily manipulated. To stay awake was to remain vigilant. To close your eyes, well, that meant you might be dreaming of rebellion. Even the gods were watching. You hear this often, muttered over clay cups of sour beer. Ra never sleeps, which, frankly, sounds exhausting. But it was enough to spark the ruling class's paranoia. Priests began spreading the idea that those who slept deeply could be possessed, or worse, that their souls might wander into forbidden realms. So now, here you are, trying not to yawn in public lest someone report you. And yes, there are informants. A merchant named Teti, you'll later learn, was accused by his own niece, claimed he had fallen asleep beside his barley jars. He denied it, of course, insisting he'd merely lowered his gaze to honor the grain. But the tribunal wasn't buying it. He was publicly shamed, made to wear an amulet of Sekhmet the lioness, goddess of punishment, and sentenced to 7 nights under the eye of Horus. A cursed fresco illuminated by an oil lamp designed to keep prisoners alert. Forever, he'd duck into a small side street where the shadows grow longer and cooler. There, nestled between 2 half-finished mud-brick homes, is an old woman selling what looks like honeyed figs. She doesn't say anything, just slides a fig toward you on a cracked plate. Her fingers tremble. You realize she's standing perfectly still because she's asleep. Standing somehow. She's perfected the art of napping with her eyes slightly open. A trick of the desperate. You're about to speak when another voice hisses from the alley wall. Don't wake her, the voice warns. She's a dream. If she hears you while she's out there, she might mistake you for a jackal. You glance over to find a boy, maybe 12, drawing circles in the dust with a chicken feather. His tunic is stitched with Charmzank's beetles, tiny silver ears. You ask if he's ever slept. He shrugs. Only twice, he says, but I don't count the time I died a little. You laugh softly, nervously, but he's dead serious. According to popular belief, every full sleep cycle allows part of your soul to slip beyond your body. And if you're not pure, or if you've been dreaming of blasphemy, something might follow you back. They call it sleep echoes, spirits, or maybe just the voice in your head that gets louder after dark. Mainstream Egyptology books rarely mention this part of daily life, too fringe, too surreal. But certain Astroka fragments of inscribed limestone have revealed drawings of people gagged while sleeping, or pierced with reeds in bed. Not punishment, but prevention. You can't speak treason in your sleep if you can't speak at all. Historians still argue whether this was a centralized policy or just scattered local hysteria, but the trend was undeniable. In many parts of the kingdom, public sleep became taboo. Street vendors stayed open all night. City festivals were extended indefinitely. Candles and oil lamps sold like, well, hot bread. And every town had at least one sleep steward, someone whose job was to log the hours you stayed awake. You'll hear of one such steward named Hup, who was so zealous in his duties that he began issuing wakefulness licenses, small painted shells you had to carry at all times to prove your alertness. They were basically the ancient Egyptian version of a coffee punch card. Still, people got creative. One woman in Thebes was caught napping inside a sarcophagus showroom, claiming she was testing it for quality. Another man buried himself up to the neck in riverbank mud just to nap undetected. He was found by crocodile herders and later hired as a state spy. You round a corner and come face to face with the mural. Not a sacred text, not a depiction of gods or afterlife. No, this one's newer. Graffiti, charcoal lines of a man curled up, eyes closed, surrounded by tiny birds flying out of his mouth. Below it, someone scrawled the words, "Sleep is the last freedom." You're not sure if it's a protest or a prophecy, and as night descends over the dunes, you feel a tug in your own eyelids. Just a moment, you tell yourself. Just a blink, but even that is a risk in this world. Here, in this sand-choked empire of vigilance, even rest is resistance. So maybe, just maybe, it's time to resist. You squint upward at the limestone cliffside, where carvings shimmer orange in the dying sun. The figures etched there aren't building pyramids or praying to gods. They're standing still, wide-eyed, staring out across eternity. There's something eerie about their expressions. Too alert, too fixed. Like someone told them they weren't allowed to blink until the afterlife. At the top of the plateau stands a palace of polished white stone, its symmetry broken only by a row of narrow slits watchpoints. This is the House of Eternal Vigilance, where Pharaoh Menes III once reigned, not the famous Menes who united Egypt, but a Lysernon descendant who, for reasons no historian has fully agreed on, became convinced that slumber was the greatest threat to his throne. You're escorted inside by two silent guards, each bearing a torch and an expression that suggests they've had just enough sleep to stay on their feet. But no more than that. The air inside is thick with cinnamon and resin smoke, pungent enough to sting your eyes. The stone floors gleam, and every few steps, a cat darts through the shadows, silent, judgmental. They bring you to a narrow chamber filled with polished copper mirrors. You expect a vanity setup, maybe some fancy wig storage. But no, these mirrors aren't for grooming, they're for monitoring. It's said that Menes III had them arranged in a complex network so that, from his throne, he could see the reflection of every servant, every guard, even his own children. Any eyelid twitch, any sagging shoulder, and he would know. He watched them like a hawk, and worse, made them watch themselves. According to surviving scrolls, Menes believed that sleep was the doorway through which betrayal entered. A single hour of sleep, he once wrote, and the jackals will come. He supposedly trained himself to sleep in microbursts in seconds at a time. Whether that's true or royal propaganda, no one's sure. But palace folklore tells of an incident where he had a vizier flayed for nodding off during a poetry recital. The poet was also punished for being too soothing. From that point on, soothing was discouraged. Temple choirs were told to sing off-key to keep people alert. Storytellers were encouraged to insert sudden loud noises into their tales. Even lullabies were outlawed. One popular children's song had its lyrics rewritten to warn babies that sleep-in brings scorpions. You can imagine how well that worked. Now, you're led into the throne room, a high-ceilinged chamber lined with obsidian statues. Each figure has its eyes wide open, no lids, no lashes, just empty, unblinking. In the center sits the throne of Menes III, carved from cedar, plated in electrum, and fitted with what look suspiciously like metal restraints, arm clamps, ankle bars, and a thin leather headband that likely wasn't decorative. Either he feared assassination in his sleep, or he feared his own dreams. There's a faint clinking behind you. You turn to see a servant carrying a ceramic tray of pale green water and dried lotus petals. "The wakeful draught," she says, placing it on a pedestal. You're not sure if it's a joke or an offering. The scent hits you like mint and crushed copper sharp, almost medicinal. Supposedly this draught was brewed from blue lotus fenugreek, and a touch of powdered malak. Quacks in the streets sold it as a tonic. Priests offered it in rituals. Everyone else just pretended it worked. Historians still argue whether this cult of sleeplessness was born from Menes' own neuroses, or if it was a political way to keep the populace too tired to rebel. After all, it's hard to plan a coup when you're hallucinating from exhaustion. But Menes didn't just demand sleeplessness, he glorified it. Artists were commissioned to sculpt him with wide, alert eyes. In one famous relief, he's depicted pushing back the sun with his bare hands, refusing to let night fall. That image, completely symbolic, of course became a badge of loyalty. Soldiers carved it into their shields. Bread vendors painted it on their carts. You even see it on the heel of a sandal discarded in the palace courtyard. The sunstopper king, forever vigilant. But the irony, Menes died in his sleep. Allegedly. Some records say he was found slumped over a chessboard at dawn, eyes closed, arms limp. Others claim his heart simply stopped after 39 consecutive days of consciousness. One fragment of a funerary scroll suggests that he chose to sleep as a final act of surrender, claiming, "If I sleep now, let it be the end of time." His tomb is unique. No depictions of restful afterlife. No bed carved into the stone. Instead, the sarcophagus rests atop a slab of carved obsidian shaped like an open eye. Even in death, the message is clear. He is watching. But perhaps the most unsettling part of the palace is what you find just past the private garden's narrow hallway of niches, each holding a papyrus scroll. It's the sleeper's register, a handwritten log of every servant, guard, and visitor suspected of sleeping on palace grounds. Thousands of names, dates, hours, punishments, some marked with red, ochre, probably those who didn't survive. One name repeats across the pages, Kemsed, daughter of Uaka. You pause at the entry, caught sleeping by the water jugs, claimed divine vision, assigned to Hall of Mirrors, no further notes. You stare at that name for a long time, because just this morning you bought bread from a woman who limped slightly, who walked with a cane carved with stars and moons, who looked you right in the eye and said, "We remember those who dared to dream." Maybe that was her. Maybe she survived, or maybe she's just a story the tired tell themselves to keep going. Outside, the wind picks up, and the sand scratches against the stone like the hiss of a lullaby trying to escape. But you don't close your eyes. Not yet. Not here. You step away from the palace, the great walls of vigilance shrinking behind you in the darkening sky, down a path carved between date palms and statues. You reach the temple of Thoth, the god of wisdom, writing, and most curiously, dreams. A contradiction, really, because if the pharaoh declared sleep criminal, why did this temple still pulse with offerings? The answer lies in what Egyptians believed about dreams. See, you're not just snoring and drooling your way through the night in this ancient world. Nope, when you dream, you're communicating, not with your subconscious, with the divine. You're led past two ibis-headed statues, their obsidian beaks shining under torchlight, into a hall where rows of sleeping mats lie unused. In the center, a priest recites a hymn in a low, rhythmic voice. He's not lulling anyone to sleep, he's invoking clarity. Because when you finally are allowed to sleep here under heavy ritual supervision, of course it's for one purpose only, to extract prophecy. This practice is known as incubation. No, not the chicken-egg kind. Incubation, in Egypt, meant sleeping in a sacred space in the hopes of receiving a vision from a god. But it wasn't a casual thing. You didn't just curl up on a straw mat and hope Thoth showed up in your REM cycle. There were rules, ritual purifications, fasting, chanting. In one papyrus scroll, a dreamer was told to recite 47 names of Thoth before sleep. So yes, there was technically sleep happening in ancient Egypt, but only if it was holy, only if it was loud and weird and scripted. You had to earn it, earn your right to rest, by promising that whatever you saw wouldn't challenge the order of things. And if it did, well, now you're in trouble. You hear about one scribe named Lost to Time who dreamt of a black sun rising over the temples. He told his superior, "Mistake." Within days, he was reassigned to grain ledger duty in the crocodile pits of Kharmumbu. Not exactly a promotion. Historians still argue whether dream punishments were state policy or just priestly overreach. Some believe the priesthood used divine dreams to spy on people's thoughts, encouraging temple-goers to confess under the guise of vision interpretation. After all, if someone dreamed about a collapsing pyramid or the pharaoh bleeding from his eyes, well, what does that say about their loyalty? But not everyone used dreams for doctrine. In the smaller town of Dendera, fringe practitioners known as dream readers popped up, less formal than temple priests. These folks lived on the edge of legitimacy. You'd find them set up near river markets, offering to interpret your nightmares in exchange for grain or cloth. Most of them used a simple chart. Snakes meant enemies, Birds meant gossip, water meant your emotions were in flux. But one group, according to an unearthed mural, believed dreams were memories from past lives bleeding through. You can imagine how the officials felt about that. One such dream reader, a man named Seba, is recorded in a crumbling side text as having been charged with unauthorized vision conjuring. His crime, claiming he'd dreamt of a city made of glass, where the gods slept during the day and judged at night. He told a client it meant the afterlife was watching us. That night, Seba disappeared, whether by state decree or divine recall, no one knows. Back in the Temple of Thoth, a novice leads you to a side chamber filled with ostrich feather pillows and black-painted jars of dream oil. You lift a jar clove and chamomile, mixed with myrrh and something sweet. Not illegal, but not exactly legal either. These jars are given only to high initiates. During sanctioned sleep ceremonies, you ask if anyone dreams without permission anymore. The novice hesitates. Well, he whispers, there's that name alone makes your skin prickle. The undertombs aren't part of the standard tours. They're off-grid vaults buried beneath older temples, sealed off during the reign of Menes III. Supposedly, these chambers were once used for unfiltered dreaming. No priests, no scrolls, just silence and stone. People still sneak in, according to rumor, the desperate, the curious, the ones too tired to care. You pass a cracked wall near the temple's edge, marked with a faded symbol, a closed eye with a keyhole in the center. It feels like it's looking inward. Below it, someone has scratched a single phrase in demotic script. All gods sleep eventually. A little heretical, maybe, but there's a thread of truth running through it. Because here's the weird thing. The gods do sleep in Egyptian myth. Not often, and never safely, but it's there. In one lesser-known tale, the goddess Hathor rests in a cave between her moments of divine rage. In another, Set tries to lull Horus to sleep with riddles, hoping to trap him in a dream world forever. These stories don't get told during state festivals. They're fringe tales. Dangerous ones, the kind that sneak into a child's ear when the lamps burn low. And maybe you've already heard one. Maybe that little boy with the chicken feather. Maybe he wasn't drawing circles for fun. Maybe they were symbols meant to hold back visions until the moment was safe. You suddenly wonder what you've been inhaling all night from the temple incense. Your limbs feel warm, your eyes soft. You blink, and for just a moment, the world tilts. But no, you're not allowed. You steel yourself, push back the wave of drowsiness. Not here. Not now. Not when dreamers vanish. Outside, the moon rises over the palms, casting everything in silver and shadow. You step into the night, your breath clouding in the cooler air, and you think about what it means to be in a world where even your sleep isn't private, where your dreams belong to the state, to the gods, to the stone walls and copper mirrors, to everyone but you. You wander down a narrow causeway lined with broken sphinx, their eyes gouged smooth by sand and time. In the distance, torchlights flickers against a blocky government hall, its windows narrow and dark. Inside is where the story of the sleeping scribe begins. It's a cautionary tale now told by teachers to novice clerks, whispered behind temple columns with the reverence usually reserved for curses. You reach the hall's courtyard just as the last of the scribes are being dismissed. Sand clings to their sandals, and their papyrus scrolls are tucked beneath their arms like fragile secrets. But centuries ago, one of them made a mistake you'd never recover from. He slept on the job. His name, a junior scribe assigned to the Bureau of Provincial Records. His work was boring, yes but sacred, recording grain counts, tracking household labor, ensuring temple taxes made their way to the priesthood. You'd think the worst he could do was misplace a decimal. Instead, he fell asleep, just once, on a sweltering afternoon. His stylus slid from his hand, his head dipped, and unfortunately for him, that was the same hour a district official happened to visit. Januni was found with his eyes closed, cheek resting in a pool of ink, and most damning of all, a faint smile curling at his lips, as if dreaming something sweet. Within an hour, he was arrested. Historians still argue whether this was a politically motivated move. Maybe Januni had annoyed someone, or uncovered a discrepancy in the temple's grain flow. But what matters is what happened next. A full tribunal. Not for laziness, for subversive sleep. You're escorted now into a chamber replica of the tribunal court. Stone benches form a horseshoe. Incense has long since faded, replaced by the smell of dust and old wax. In the center of the room stands a wooden reconstruction of the pillar of confession where Januni was bound. They didn't torture him, not in the usual way. No, they asked him to describe his dream. And here's where it gets weird. He did. He claimed, quite plainly, that in his dream he had seen the goddess Matha, embodiment of truth, walk into the chamber and turn all the papyrus scrolls into birds. The birds then flew to the ceiling, circled 3 times, and whispered, "The records are lies." Yikes. This caused chaos. Not because people believed the scrolls were actually lies, but because Januni had no way of knowing. He wasn't senior enough to audit those scrolls. The idea that a dream might access forbidden knowledge was deeply unsettling. So naturally, the state panicked. They accused him of heresy, of consorting with false spirits, of somehow using dreams to bypass official channels. A fringe theory circulated that he'd taken part in illegal sleep convergence, a practice where 2 people slept near each other to enter a shared dream state. This was already banned by then. Too unpredictable, too seductive. The court ruled him unclean for record duty, but he wasn't executed. No, his punishment was loud humiliation. He was stripped of his writing belt, had his stylus snapped in half, and was reassigned to a wake station outside Memphis, where he stood night watch over sacred ibis nests. For 12 years, he was never allowed to sleep more than 2 hours at a time. Guards checked his breath, his eyelids, even his pulse. If it slowed too much, he was shaken awake. You see fragments of his story etched into the tiles here. One tiny slab shows a bird with writing in its beak, hovering above a sleeping man. Another has the phrase, "He who dreams declares." There's something about the way that line is scratched frantic, unfinished, like someone didn't want to be caught writing it. But there's more. According to a little-known funerary stela, possibly his, Januni eventually did sleep again. It reads, "When the ibis flew at midnight, he closed his eyes and returned to the scrolls." Coded language, probably, but locals interpret it as rebellion. That one night, after years of forced wakefulness, he chose rest, not a nap, a real, full sleep. No witnesses, just him, the moon, and a dozen sacred birds. They say he died that night, peacefully, smiling, but the state spun it differently. His death was announced as failure to remain alert, a cautionary tale, a footnote. Still, word spread. Scribes in other cities began sneaking naps in record rooms. They wrote mistake in elegant calligraphy, then blamed it on visions. One clerk allegedly forged his own dream prophecy to request a temple transfer. Whether these rumors are true or apocryphal doesn't matter. What matters is the shift. The fear of sleep became tangled with the power of dreams. Now, every time you see a scribe's kit stylus, ink palette, stringed notepad, you wonder how many of them dreamed things they never confessed. You pass a statue near the court's exit, half buried in sand. It's Januni, though his name is scratched off. His eyes are closed, his hands are empty, and for a moment he looks like he's resting. Not dead, not punished, just asleep. And in this world, that might be the boldest thing anyone could be. You leave the hall behind as twilight thickens into something weightless like evening, more like being watched by the sky itself. The desert cools fast, and your breath fogs slightly as you make your way into the residential quarters of the city. Here, life is quieter, narrow alleys, homes stacked like limestone loaves, the kind of place where children chase each other between pots and old women trade gossip with their feet in water basins. But tonight, no one's outside, not because of a curfew, because of fatigue. You slip through a courtyard where papyrus leaves flutter like warning flags, and duck into a long corridor that smells of sleep, denol stale oil, incense, ash, and nervous sweat. This is one of the wake houses. You've heard of them. Every district has one. Not temples, not prisons, not schools, though. Parts of all three seem folded in. They're part social hall, part surveillance post, and entirely built around keeping the population alert. The interior is all harsh lines and bright surfaces. Mirrors and polished copper plates reflect torchlight in every direction. Soft edges have been replaced with hard benches. No pillows, no rugs, just straight back seating and low tables. Even the design screams, "Don't get comfortable." You're handed a mug of something warm and bitter kaffir root. They call it supposedly energizing. Realistically, it tastes like boiled regret. You sip anyway. Better than being caught yawning, a man tells you. He's sitting beside a brazier, eyes rimmed red, fingers tapping a steady beat on the wood. He introduces himself as Amos, a carpenter by trade, but lately assigned night-wait duties by his local magistrate. Rotating shifts, he says with a shrug. To prove devotion. Prove it by staying awake. And he's not the only one. All around the room are people like him. Farmers, midwives, porters, even a young boy with coal smeared under his eyes like war paint. Everyone here is participating in what officials call public wakefulness demonstrations. In theory, it's voluntary. In practice, you're summoned. And if you're not seen for several nights in a row, someone knocks on your door. At the far end of the hall, a bronze gong hangs from a hemp rope. Every half hour, it's struck lightly, but enough to keep time. And every hour, a vigil steward walks the floor with a tally tablet, marking who's blinking too long. It sounds extreme, but there's method in this madness. You see, sleep isn't just criminal. Here it's also contagious. That's what people believe. That one person dozing off in public could trigger a cascade failure in communal vigilance, like yawning in a church pew. One nod becomes many. So wakehouses were designed not just to suppress sleep but to prevent its spread. And they're surprisingly high-tech for the time. Clever mechanisms rigged to jolt benches if someone leans too far. Water drip lines that splash if you start to slouch. A tiny sand hourglass embedded in the wall that, if untouched, gets flipped by a steward to signal your inattentiveness. You pass a mural on the wall titled Insomnia by Divine Design. It depicts Ra sailing across the sky in his solar bark, tossing down thunderbolts at villagers curled in their beds. Exaggerated, yes, but it conveys the message. He sees you when you're sleeping and is not happy about it. A lesser-known historical fact. Many Egyptian homes during this period were deliberately designed to discourage comfort. Scholars later coined the term insomniarchita, a clunky phrase, but accurate. Ceilings were sloped at awkward angles. Bedding was limited to straw and palm fiber mats, and windows faced east to allow sunrise to hit the eyes immediately. One satirical poem from the period includes the line, "I do not sleep, for sleep is seduction dressed as linen." Fringe reports go further. Some towns experimented with communal sleeping bans, mandating that no one within a given district could sleep for more than 3 hours at a time without official approval. People would rotate nap shifts in cellar corners, often with someone assigned to watch over them and record their words. Yes, words, because even your sleep talk was evidence. One stone tablet recovered from a site near Aswan contains what appears to be a transcript of a sleeping man's mutterings. Roughly translated, it reads, "I bury my name in sand. I light the king's name on fire." Definitely not the kind of pillow talk you want in a world like this. And then there were the anti-sleep sacraments. Back in the wake house, a young woman lights a cone of resin on her head. The aroma is sweet and thick, laced with saffron and citrus peel. It's meant to tingle, to burn slightly, to keep her from drifting. A man near her dabs wax on his earlobes, another trick. Apparently, if you seal certain dream pores, you block the soul's exit. You blink, and in that moment, someone gasps. It's too loud, too sharp. The steward's eyes flash to you. He walks over. "You all right?" he asks. The tone isn't concern, it's evaluation. You nod. Just a blink. He narrows his eyes. They all start that way. He marks a thin line on his tablet and moves on. You exhale, heartbeat ticking louder than the gong. Later, as you step outside, you pass a group of young boys drawing symbols in the dirt. One of them sketches a cat sleeping beneath a moon. Another draws a man with one eye open. They all laughed at, not too loudly. Then one of them looks up at you and whispers, "My grandfather used to say, sleep is the body's way of rebelling in silence." You ask what happened to his grandfather. He shrugs. Silence. He repeats. The wake house looms behind you like a school for insomniac saints, and you wonder how many of them believe, how many are just pretending, how many are secretly praying for a quiet corner where they can close their eyes and forget for just a moment. That dreaming is a crime. You follow the scent of burnt cinnamon and wet clay down toward the old market road, where the city of Memphis once pulsed like a heart beside the Nile. In the shadow of shuttered shops and crumbling awnings, stories still drift like dust. One story, whispered over shared loaves and behind cracked doors, is that of the Pillow Thieves, group of ordinary citizens who dared to bring softness back into the night. You're not sure if the name started as a joke, but the danger, that was all too real. It began with a woman named Nainifer, a retired flax weaver whose hands were as knotty as old wood. She'd worked in temple linen houses for decades, weaving altar cloths and priestly but after her final contract ended, she turned to a quiet black market trade. Pillow stuffing, simple enough, papyrus husks, goose down if you could find it, or even shredded palm bark wrapped tight in linen. Nothing treasonous, unless, of course, you sold it for sleeping. And Nainifer did exactly that. She wasn't alone. A growing number of out-of-work craftspeople, potters, basket weavers, leather workers joined her. They worked by moonlight, taking commissions in code. 1 cloud for your neck, they'd say. 2 clouds if the dreams are heavy, and it worked. Quietly, these rebels created a system of comfort. Underground pillows circulated like relics. Some were disguised as seat cushions, others as prayer mats. But make no mistake, people were using them to nap. The group met near an abandoned kill just outside city walls, under the ruined gaze of a toppled sphinx. Their leader, a former barber named who claimed to have once shaved the neck of a high priest so well that the man fell asleep in the chair. Heckanacht considered it his finest crime. They operated with care, but as with most things, success invited attention. One night, a man named Nebois collapsed at a midday tribute ceremony, face first into the royal offering table. At first, it was assumed he'd fainted from heat, but when the guards dragged him up, something slipped from under his robes. A pillow, embroidered, stuffed with fennel fluff and rice chaff. It had been hand-stitched with the image of a sleeping lion. Subtle, but damning. Nebois was arrested immediately. He confessed under pressure not to any greater conspiracy, but to having bought the pillow from a woman who wore silver beetles in her braids. That was enough. Raids followed. Nainifer's home was ransacked. Her looms were burned in the street. 3 of her co-conspirators were sent north in chains, and the pillow operation disbanded overnight, or so the officials claimed. But you hear otherwise. You meet a man selling dried dates who claims his father once slept on one of Nainifer's creations. It had blue stitching, he says, like water flowing into your spine. He said it was like dreaming underwater, slow and safe. He points you toward a bakery that never closes, one that always smells of anise and barley, but never sells more than 2 loaves per person. Behind the ovens, the baker keeps an alcove lined with sacks. Not flour, not grain, stuffing. I only sew for the sick, the baker insists, or the heartbroken. Just a little softness. No harm in that. Yes, you ask if it's true that people still sleep in shifts, lying flat with their eyes open. He chuckles. There's a trick, he says. You sew tiny black beads into the corners of your eyelids. When your eyes roll back in sleep, they still look like they're watching. Practical, creepy, absolutely brilliant. Historians still argue whether the pillow thieves were real or romanticized. Just one more bedtime legend about resistance in disguise. But the evidence, however anecdotal, stacks up. In 1921, an archaeologist found a secret compartment in a collapsed Memphis warehouse. Inside were dozens of linen sacks, stuffed and stitched with an identical symbol, a circle with 3 diagonal lines crossing it. Some say it's the eye of a sleeping god. Others claim it's a bird caged by, because sleep, in this era, is a form of caging the soul, gently, before it escapes. There's even a fringe theory that the circle represents the full moon, and the lines are slats of a shutter that the pillows weren't just for comfort, but for catching dreams, preserving them, hiding them from the priests who might interpret them the wrong way. You slip out of the bakery into the alley behind it, where the shadows fall long and the night feels deeper. You sit against the wall, not lying down, not fully, just enough to feel the ache behind your eyes. The truth is, the longer you walk these streets, the more you understand the danger of rest, not because of what you might do, but because of what it means. To sleep is to trust the world not to change while your back is turned. To sleep is to believe your body deserves restoration, even if the state disagrees. You imagine a pillow stitched by Nainifer's hand, probably uneven, maybe lumpy, definitely forbidden, and you think, that must have felt like rebellion itself, one soft place in a hard world. You wake no. You snap back to attention, unsure when your thoughts drifted. You're still upright, still moving, but something in your body betrayed you for a split second. Your heart pounds harder than it should. A blink, or something more. You can't be sure. In this place, even a momentary lapse can feel like confession. the road turns to polished stone. You're nearing the palace again, but this time from a different angle toward the upper chambers, the ones not shown to diplomats. These are the private apartments of the pharaoh, and you're about to enter the most sacred and paradoxical room in Egypt, the royal bedchamber. The door itself is a statement, tall and severe, made of cedar wood, inlaid with electrum in the shape of open eyes. The handle, cold iron, shaped like a scarab creature that never rests, always rolling its little son across the sand. Fitting. Inside, you brace yourself for opulence, and you get it, but not the way you expect. There is gold, yes, silks, fresh-cut lotus, blossoms and alabaster jars. But the bed, it's not a bed, it's a platform. Flat, hard, about the size of a modest dining table. There's no pillow, no canopy, no softness, just a gently sloped slab of polished black basalt with head and foot braces sculpted into it. You recognize them. Restraint. The pharaoh's bed is a surveillance station. Above the platform, a frame of copper tubing holds hanging bells, tiny ones, sensitive enough to jingle at the faintest shift in breath. A scribe was once stationed here, night after night, to record how often the bells moved, not for comfort, for consistency, because Pharaoh Menes III, like many who came after him, didn't sleep in the human sense. He reposed, briefly, with intention. He claimed his body entered divine pause, a meditative trance between breath and wake. Anything more was weakness, but we all sleep, eventually. So he developed a system. Instead of dreaming, he watched, and he made sure others watched too. Hidden in the walls are peepholes small enough to go unnoticed unless you know where to look. Guards rotated through these slots hourly, tasked not with protecting the pharaoh from intruders, but from sleep itself. One fringe account suggests that he installed a mirror directly above the slab, so his own face would stare down at him as he rested. A self-interrogation, a test of loyalty to himself. There's a faint sound to your right foot. A steward approaches, bowing just enough to be formal. His eyes are clear but tight at the edges, like someone who's been trained to look alert more than be alert. He slept here, the steward says, gesturing to the slab. 1 hour each solstice, no more, and only after fasting. The room was sealed. The air weighed. The air was weighed. You raise an eyebrow. To measure whether his spirit remained within, the steward replies simply. You can't tell if he believes it, or if belief even matters anymore. Historians still debate whether this elaborate ritual was genuinely practiced or stylized propaganda meant to cement the pharaoh's image as above mortal needs. But the architecture is real. The logs of nightly watch rotations are real, and the slab definitely real. In the corner of the chamber, there's a riding belt draped over a hook. It's leather, worn smooth from decades of use, a stylus still tucked into the loop. It belonged to the palace scribe, who documented each breath the pharaoh took in his pause. Imagine that job, counting exhales, judging purity of rest, and knowing that one stray ink mark could be seen as sabotage. You find a scroll case nearby, lacquered in blue and gold. Inside is a short passage, no author, maybe a journal entry. It reads, "He does not dream, but I do. I dreamed once of a field where no one watched me sleep. I did not record this." Beneath it, no name, no date, just a smudge of ink, as if someone changed their mind about leaving it behind. And still, there's more. Behind the bed slab, carved directly into the wall, is a sequence of reliefs. At first, they seem decorative guards, animals, waves, but on closer inspection, they follow a pattern. A human figure, eyes open, slowly lowering into sleep. The eyes remain open. Then, in the final image, they close. Immediately, fire engulfs the scene. It's not a warning, it's a cycle. The message is clear. Cliff's dies equals destruction. Whether metaphorical or enforced, you can't tell. But the idea has power. In a world where Pharaoh himself refuses to close his eyes, sleep becomes not just subversive, it becomes sacrilege. You step back from the wall. You can almost feel the heat of imagined flames licking at your own lids. The steward coughs softly behind you. "You may view the records," he says, "but do not touch the platform." You weren't planning to, but the way he says it makes you wonder what would happen if you did. If you just laid down, just for a second, would the bells tinkle? Would the guards come? Or would the stone remember? You take one last look at the slab and imagine a pharaoh lying there, body stiff, mind racing, trying to hold off the most human thing in the world. You imagine the silence, the breath, the fear that even 1 second of unconsciousness might unravel the illusion of godhood, and then you walk away, careful not to blink too slowly. Outside, the night is absolute. You stare up at the stars and realize why so many of them in Egyptian art have open eyes, because even the heavens are expected to stay awake. The stars follow you now, or so it seems. They hang in the sky like tiny overseers, winking not out of friendliness, but vigilance. There's something almost smug about their consistency. You're heading further down the Nile's edge now, toward the Temple of Hathor, at Denderon outpost of beauty, music, and something less discussed. Trance states. You arrive under cover of moonlight. The temple is quiet, its facade etched with rows of dancers, musicians, and beneath all that joy hidden in the gestures, buried in the poses' exhaustion. Inside, the columns bloom like papyrus stalks, rising to meet a painted ceiling of stars. But your focus drifts downward, to the floor-flat stones, worn smooth by bare feet pacing in slow, ritualistic circles, not processions, not morning wake dances. You see, while other temples enforce sleeplessness with threat and punishment, the priestesses of Hathor chose ecstasy, motion, sensory overload. You didn't resist sleep by force, you danced it out of your body. They called it treading the veil. It sounds poetic. It wasn't. Imagine, you've fasted for 2 days. You're wearing perfume so strong it burns your nose. The drums haven't stopped since sunset, and someone just handed you wine laced with blue lotus and a stimulant scraped from desert beetle resin. You're expected to spin in rhythm until you're no longer sure if you're awake or simply buzzing above yourself. This wasn't party time. It was discipline disguised as ritual. Sleep couldn't catch you if your soul was constantly dancing just ahead of your body. In one preserved wall carving, a priestess is shown with her arms raised, head tilted back, eyes wide. But next to her, painted in a fainter pigment, is a second version of her transparent, ghost-like drifting backward. It's believed to be an artistic representation of her spirit separating, hovering on the edge of sleep, or of collapse. You walk past niches filled with sacred instruments, rattles, sistrums, clappers, tools designed not for rhythm alone but for interruption. Sharp noises, sudden dissonance, all orchestrated to keep acolytes suspended in a state of near transcendence, never fully asleep, never fully present. Historians still argue whether these rituals were sincere spiritual practices or simply elaborate coping mechanisms. One theory suggests the cult of Hathor used altered consciousness as a form of control, sleep sneaking dreams into ceremonies under the state's radar. But if that's true, they were careful. No one wrote it down. You didn't document subversion here. You danced it into your bones. You meet a woman kneeling before a wall relief of Hathor. She hums under her breath, a melody without words. When you ask her what she's singing, she replies, "It's a rhythm to carry the weight. If I stop, I feel the sleep come too fast." She taps her wrist, and you notice small, even scars dots in a line. "Every time I nod it off," she says, "a drop of hot oil, just enough to remember." You'll want to be horrified, but you've already seen worse. The temple archives hold scrolls filled with strange phrases, spirals in the mind, dreams through mirrors. The yawn of the goddess is a gate. The meaning is unclear, but you get the sense that someone, maybe many someones, were mapping the boundaries between sleep, trance, and vision, and finding the edges very, very thin. One fringe theory, controversial but compelling, claims that some priestesses weaponize sleep, not for rest, but for influence. They'd enter controlled dream trances and whisper to nobles in ritual sessions, planting suggestions under the guise of spiritual advice. Some claimed this is why one high official renounced his title and became a beggar overnight. He said Hathor showed him the truth in golden slumber. He died less than a week later. Coincidence? Depends who you ask. You walk through a smaller hall, the air thick with rose oil. There's a platform in the center with velvet cords hung like vines once, used to suspend initiates, slightly off the ground while they chanted and spun. The goal, to reach a state where the body forgot it could sleep, because it no longer remembered stillness. You touch one of the cords. It hums faintly, as if echoing a vibration long past. You find an inscription beneath the platform. "She who dances forever cannot be caught by dreams." A mantra, a warning, or maybe just desperate hope. Outside the temple, You notice a narrow trail of worn stone curved like the swirl of a shell. Locals call it the sleep spiral. It's said that initiates would walk it all night in silence, thinking one thought over and over until it replaced their need for rest. You try it, one foot in front of the other, clockwise, then counterclockwise. The wind picks up, scattering petals and dust around your sandals. Your thoughts turn soft. You start to forget what hour it is. But you keep walking. You must keep walking. Sleep, in this place, is a predator waiting in the brush. Stillness is its call. You know now why the priestesses danced. Not for celebration, not even for the goddess, but because sometimes movement is the only way to survive. You leave the temple complex just before the drums begin again. Their echo trailing you like a hungry animal. The rhythm gets into your bones. After a while it follows you even after the sound stops, like a phantom beat in your chest. It's a long walk to your next destination, deeper into the desert's edge, past the water wheels, past the faded tombs of noblemen, past the fields where laborers once worked in shifts so tightly scheduled they measured rest not by hours but by heartbeats. You're going to the training compound at Deir Elmed, not for warriors, for architects. Here's a little-known truth. The people who built the tombs, those perfectly aligned corridors, those chambers etched with starlight and divine vengeance, they were trained under the strictest anti-sleep regimes in the kingdom. Because you don't carve eternity with a drowsy hand. You pass through a crumbled archway and into a sunken courtyard littered with broken chisels and half-chiseled dreams. The walls here are etched, not with gods, but with methangled lines, proportion grids, strange geometric patterns. This is the mind's side of monument making. You're greeted by an old man leaning on a staff. His face is leathered from sun, and he watches you with that expression you've seen before tonight. Polite suspicion layered over deep, bone-level fatigue. "Come to see the sleepers," he says. You nod. "They're gone," he adds, "but their mistakes remain." He leads you into what was once the architect dormitory, a series of tight, windowless cells carved directly into stone. One bed per room. Except, again, not beds. Just slabs, angled slightly. No padding, no blankets. The floors are clean but worn into shallow dip spaces where pacing footsteps have grooved the limestone. Every student had to log 12 sleepless nights, the man explains. Each night they were tested. Not just math, vision, recall, sacred geometry under pressure, and if they failed, he gestures to a sealed chamber nearby. They called it the forgetting room. They'd sleep in there. Once. Just once. Then they'd never be called again. You step closer. The door is sealed, but a viewing slit remains. You peer in. There's nothing dramatic, just an empty slab, a dim oil lamp, and a carved instruction on the wall. Sleep only when the design is perfect. Sleep imperfect, and it unbuilds. Chilling, poetic, possibly true. You've heard that some tombs were redrawn after the architect dreamed of floors. Not so, as if their unconscious minds could perceive instability before conscious calculation caught up. That's the line that worried the state. What happens when dreams become more accurate than waking thought? Some fringe engineers actually encouraged it. They built dream scaffolds, angled headrests, designed to position the neck and skull at just the right tilt to enter lucid states during 10 minutes, just enough to see the floor, then wake, but most kept quiet about it. Because one high-ranking designer, a man named Paraem, once admitted accidentally that he had a dream in which the tomb he was building collapsed, crushed the pharaoh, and revealed a secret chamber beneath filled with nothing but black water. He was dead within the week, fell from scaffolding, they said. No witnesses. Historians still argue whether he was silenced or simply unlucky. But to this day, a faint blueprint survives of a tomb with a never-built lower chamber labeled simply Lake of the Dreaming Mouth. Coincidence? Maybe. But if you'd seen what this place does to minds, the man guides you to the outer gallery, where a great sandstone tablet displays rows of waking diagrams. These were tests not of architectural knowledge, but of endurance logic. Mazes drawn in non-Euclidean fashion, paradox shapes, tasks designed to scramble the frontal lobe just enough to filter out the tired. You solve one of these wrong, the man says, and it meant your mind was slipping. You point to a symbol that looks like a snake eating its tail while spinning inside a cube. What does that mean? He shrugs. No one knows. They stopped teaching that one. Students started fainting. You can't help but wonder how many people here were less architects than canaries pushed to the edge of mental collapse, so the state could learn the breaking point. You'd notice something else on the wall, a phrase etched hastily into the margin of one of the test sheets. I build because I cannot dream. I design because I dare not sleep. Whoever wrote it scratched it deep, as though they knew it might outlast them. Before you leave, the old man shows you one last thing. In a sealed glass case, it's a headrest, ornate, ivory, carved with a winged sun on one end and a closed lotus on the other. It's beautiful. Belonged to the last master architect, the man says. He designed a tomb so precise, they say the gods themselves couldn't escape it. You ask what happened to him. He smiles faintly. First person in 50 years to be allowed to sleep. You tilt your head. Once, in the finished tomb. Alone. The door sealed after him. You ask if he woke up. The man doesn't answer, but as you leave, you glance back at the sealed door to the forgetting room. The lamp is still lit, and you wonder, did the dream stay in there? Or do they walk the corridors still, etched into the stone, whispering from the blueprints? The night outside is dry and endless. You find your own footing now, more careful, because in a world where even architects are punished for sleeping, you start to question whether anything truly rests here at all. You're not sure what time it is anymore. Not that it matters. Time here isn't measured in hours or days, it's measured in blinks, in how long your eyes can stay open before the mind begins to invent movement in shadows. You begin your descent now, away from the halls of state and temple, away from the tools of record and rule, down into something older, more primal. You're entering the Dream Tomb, not its real name, of course. Officially, it's known as Tomb TT 302, or sometimes simply the Sealed Crypt near up. But for those who know the story or feel it, there's only one name that fits, because what was buried here wasn't just a nobleman, it was asleep. The entrance is nearly lost to sand, just the faintest outline of stairs descending into the earth like a ribcage turned inward. As you step into the gloom, a chill wraps around your spine like a damp linen shroud. Not cold, exactly more like dormant air, the kind that hasn't been breathed in centuries. A torch sputters behind you, casting the passage in flickering amber. Your footfalls echo, and then thick, weighty, personal, as if this place remembers sound and finds it distasteful. At the base of the stairwell, you find the first anomaly, a false door carved into the wall. Common in Egyptian tombs, yes, but this one is different. There's no offering table, no inscriptions of food or wine or funerary rites. Instead, a single line etched in delicate, almost hesitant script. He who opens the eye of sleep will drown in waking. Comforting. You pass through a tight corridor painted with what appears to be standard funerary weighing of the heart. Boats crossing celestial rivers, but look again and you notice something off. Every figure has closed eyes. Every single one. Even Ra, even Horus, even the jackal-headed gods. In any other tomb, that would be blasphemy. Here, it's devotion. This is the burial place of a man named Kenem, not a pharaoh, not a priest, a philosopher of some forgotten order. His title, preserved on a half-rest stele, is Master of the Inner Dusk. No one knows exactly what that meant. Theories abound. Some say he studied dreams as divine language. Others claim he sought to store dreams, like grain. You step into the antechamber, and it feels like crossing into another state of being. The walls curve inward, painted with deep blues and soft grazy nothing garish. No gold, just softness. Painted pillows, blankets, stars that droop slightly, as if caught mid-blink. And in the center, a sarcophagus shaped, not like a standard box, but like a sleeping figure. Curved spine, tilted head, hands resting gently over the chest. It's not a coffin, it's a bed. You circle it slowly. No guards painted around it, no snakes, no curses, just a repeating phrase in small, looping glyphs. To dream without fear, to sleep without witness. It feels intimate, subversive, beautiful. But the story doesn't end there. Behind the main chamber is a sealed annex, unearthed only decades ago. The passage was discovered accidentally by a tremor that cracked part of the ceiling. Inside were shelves, not stone, but wood, rotten, collapsed. And among the debris, scrolls, hundreds, dream journals. You hold one now, unrolled delicately under a protective cloth. It's written in first person, and unlike anything else from the era, It begins with an apology. I do not write to defy the gods, but to speak to them where they hidden asleep between days. Each scroll recounts a dream. Some are mundane, walking through reeds, speaking with long-dead relatives, floating above pyramids. Others, unsettling. One speaks of a voice that sounds like wind through dry teeth. Another describes a staircase with no steps, just endless down, and a soft sound at the bottom, breathing. Historians still argue whether Kenemator truly believed he was accessing the divine through dreams, or if he was simply documenting early cases of sleep hallucinations. One fringe theory suggests he was part of a hidden sect that believed reality itself was unstable, and dreams were a truer version of the world than original draft. With waking life, the corrupted edit, you find a final scroll, brittle but intact. No title, just the line, repeated over and over like a chant. The gods do not speak to the awake. Then a pause, and in a different hand. He slept too long. The tomb is not silent. You step back. The torch flickers. For a second, you swear you hear breathing behind you, but when you turn, it's only the wind pushing through the cracks above. Still, you can't shake the sense that this tomb wasn't built for a dead man, but by one. That Kenemator wasn't laid to rest in his sleep, but rather buried because of it. There's a saying etched near the exit, so faint it's nearly lost. Do not wake the one who dreams the world. Let him sleep, or the sky may crack. You climb back into open air, and for the first time in hours, the stars feel like they're blinking, too. You leave the dream tomb with your steps slower than before. Maybe it's the weight of the air in there, or maybe you've started to carry something you can't quite name, like an idea that's burrowed just beneath the surface of your thoughts, curled up and waiting. You head now to the docks. You're not here for boats. You're here for boats that never leave. It begins with a whisper you overheard back in the capital. If you need rest but cannot risk it, sail with the eye. Vague, nonsensical, but as it turns out very real. Along the Nile's quieter tributaries, moored away from the main shipping lanes, are vessels not for transport, not for war, and not for ceremony. They're for dreamers. The first one you find looks unassuming. No sails, just a low, squat reed-holed bark tied lazily to the dock. But up close, you see it. An eye painted on the bow, the iris elongated, the pupil shaped like a flame. A man leans against a post nearby, chewing something that stains his lips red. He looks you over and finally says, "You gonna ride or just stare?" You ask him what the boat does. "Depends," he says. Some say it rocks the thoughts out of you. Others say it lets you sleep without being seen. Me, I just like the quiet. The vessel is part of a floating ritual known as the nodding eye. People board alone. They're given a small oil lamp, a cup of diluted date wine, and instructions. Lie flat, close one, leave the other open, drift. It sounds ridiculous. And yet, as you step onto the boat, it creaks in a way that feels rehearsed, like it's done this 1,000 times. The interior is narrow, barely wide enough to stretch out. There's no steering mechanism, no oars, just the current, the hum of reeds brushing the hull, and your own heartbeat. You lie back. The roof curves low, painted with faint stars and eye motifs, some open, some closed. One is half-lidded with a single teardrop. A small plaque above your head reads, "The eye sees you so you don't have to." It's meant to comfort. It doesn't, because now you understand. These boats were built for people who had to sleep, who couldn't keep up with the regime of endless waking, who risked everything for a fragment of rest. But to do so safely, they turned to misdirection. If someone else, something else was watching for them, then maybe their lapse wouldn't be noticed. Historians still argue whether these boats were sanctioned by rogue temple factions or maintained in secret by sympathetic fishermen. One fringe theory even claims the eye wasn't metaphorical, that a piece of divine spirit resided in the boats, watching dreamers and shielding them from spiritual consequence. The boat rocks, just slightly, and for a moment you feel it. That pull, not just physical, the kind that lures your thoughts out of line, that loosens the knots in your muscles, the kind that whispers, "Just 5 minutes," but you don't close your eyes. Not fully. You remember the steward's voice back in the wakehouse. They all start that way. You sit up. You look around the hull. Carved into the wood are names, dozens, scratched by hand. Some have dates, some don't. One name appears several times. Towie. Beneath it, someone etched. 3 sails, 3 dreams, One return. You find the dockmaster again. You ask if anyone's ever sailed these boats too far. He nods. There was a woman, he says. Raya. She boarded with a stone in her lap. Said it was the weight of her family's names. She never came back. Boat floated in 2 days later. Empty. Dry. Not a drop of water inside. You ask what he thinks happened. He shrugs. Maybe the eye decided she needed rest more than us. You disembark and continue along the shoreline. There are more boats, some small enough for children, others wide and flat like floating altars, all unpowered, all pointed gently north, toward the mouth of the river and the sea beyond toward unknowns, too vast for waking minds. One vessel bears a painted phrase along the rim. Only those who trust the current may dream. The people who used these boats weren't rebels in the obvious sense. They weren't shouting in the streets or toppling statues. They were quiet revolutionaries, surrendering to something the world told them to fear. They weren't trying to escape punishment. They were trying to deserve it. Because in this Egypt, this strange, sleepless Egypt choosing to rest, wasn't just a need. It was a moral act, an affirmation of something larger than discipline. Maybe even larger than fear. The sky begins to lighten. You didn't notice when night turned into but the eye sees. Maybe it always did, and as you step off the last boat and back onto the land, the soil feels less stable than before, like the real world is the one still drifting. Dawn finds you farther south, near Thebes, where the earth feels older, heavier, and more intent on keeping secrets. You've come in search of a man called the Listener. Not his real name. No one remembers that. But if you ask around long enough, trade the right favors, someone will eventually whisper a direction. A hill, a ruin, a single painted stone half buried in sand. The Listener was once a physician, or maybe a scribe. It varies depending on who's telling the story, but all accounts agree on one thing. He studied sleep not to banish it, but to translate it. He believed dreams were encrypted messages from the body diagnostic scrolls written in metaphor, where others feared the symbolism. He saw language. A fever might appear as a burning house, loneliness as a missing name on a tablet. If you dreamed of drowning, he'd ask, was the water clear or full of ink? You find his hermitage half collapsed, tucked behind a stone ridge where desert birds make nests in the cracks. The air smells like dust and dried herbs. Inside, shelves sag under the weight of clay tablets and crushed reed bundles. There are no beds here, only reclining benches angled oddly supporting the body. Yes, but never comfortably, because comfort, he said, dulled the signal. You leaf through one of his preserved notebooks. On the first page, a dream diagram, a body with symbols over each organized for the liver, fish for the stomach, ants for the lungs. Below it, a line of text. To understand the sleep, you must listen where it hurts. You sit on one of the benches, careful not to disturb the curled mat of papyrus beneath you. On it, a list of symptoms. Clenched jaw, heavy limbs, falling sensation. Then, a diagnosis. Grief denied. He was mapping emotions through unconscious habits, observing not just that someone slept, but how. Did they twitch? Did they speak? Did their breath skip, or sigh, or stop entirely? Historians still argue whether the Listener was part of a wider movement or merely a solitary eccentric. One fringe scholar believes he once worked inside the pharaoh's court as a dream auditor, interpreting the nightmares of high-ranking officials under pressure. If true, he likely witnessed things that made escape seem safer than prestige. You find a case of polished black stones, each inscribed with symbols. A bird with its head turned backward, a mouth covered by water, a closed door under a rising sun. He gave these to patients as dream tokens, items to hold during sleep. To anchor the mind in metaphor, you press one of the stones to your palm. It's warm, somehow. Or maybe you just want it to be. Behind a low curtain, you discover a hidden alcove with a painted wall. It's different from the restless, stylized, more chaotic. Lines loop and cross. Images overlap. A sleeping figure is shown in 15 stages, from curled up vulnerability to standing tall and wide-eyed. But in the final image, something strange. The figure splits into two. One stays still, the other walks away. A phrase beneath it reads, "Only by resting do we know which self we are." That's when you notice something else. This wall isn't finished. There are markings in the margins, new sketches, a stylus left in mid-dip. The Listener was still working when he vanished. Or perhaps he vanished because he was working. You sit for a while, and something shifts. You notice how quiet it is. Hear not the oppressive silence of tombs, but a held breath, the kind of silence that listens back. This place wasn't just about sleep. It was about consensusing when and how to enter it, reclaiming it from fear, from surveillance, from shame. People came to the listener not just to sleep, but to forgive themselves for wanting to. There's a short inscription scratched onto the back of a clay tablet. You'll almost miss it. If you dream while being watched, the dream does not belong to you. It lands heavy, because so much of Egypt's war on sleep has been about ownership, about the state deciding whose rest is legitimate, whose dreams are safe, whose bodies are allowed to soften. You look around the ruin one last time. The listener isn't here anymore. Maybe he died. Maybe he simply walked off the dream wall and into the horizon. Or maybe he's waiting in the dreams of those who still remember. You step out into the morning sun, which burns a little too brightly after the soft dimness inside. You squint, not from the light, from the sudden ache behind your eyes. You haven't blinked in a while, and you wonder, not for the first time, if sleep is catching up, not like a punishment, but like an old friend you ghosted one too many times. You don't walk so much now as drift. Your steps have softened. Your sense of direction feels like it's being held loosely by someone half listening, and maybe that's fitting. You're heading toward the edges now not of geography, but of what this society can hold together before it frays. The border town you reach has no name on the map. Locals call it the Blink. Some say it's because the whole town seems to vanish when viewed from afar. Others say it's because people there risk sleep in defiance of all that's been built to prevent it. The Blink doesn't have walls. It has curtains, hung between trees, draped from makeshift poles, swaying gently in the breeze like slow exhalations. The air smelled faintly of myrrh and boiled milk, comforting, faintly surreal. A woman greets you at the edge of town. She doesn't ask who you are. She simply says, "Don't talk too loudly. Some of us are still inside." Inside what? She doesn't answer, just gestures to the nearest tent. You pull back the curtain. Inside are 7 people lying on mats, some snoring softly, others utterly still. One is murmuring nonsense words, barely audible. A child kneels nearby, drawing on the floor with a burnt stick, copying the sounds as glyphs in a spiral. You step back out. The woman is still watching you. "We keep the dreams," she says, "so no one else has to." You walk deeper into town. No lights. Just clay lanterns dimmed so low they cast shadows brighter than flame. No shouting, no coins changing hands. And yet, commerce still happens. The main street is lined with tiny stalls that offer things like weighted veils, crocodile bomb, and the town's specialty, shadow braids. Each braid is woven with a single thread of ink-soaked linen. Supposedly, it lets the wearer sleep for 5 minutes without being noticed, the ink mimicking the patterns of wakefulness on the scalp. You try one. The vendor presses her palm to your forehead and says, "No one will know. Not even you." You believe her. Further in, you find the Hall of Hush. It's not a hall, just a circle of cushions arranged in silence. People sit with eyes open, not speaking, not moving, not blinking, until one does. A young man, tears slipping sideways from his face. His mouth parts slightly, and he whispers, "I saw her." A ripple of understanding moves through the group. No one asks who. The moment is enough. The town records, if you can call them that, are kept in a building called the Eye's Pause. It's shaped like a giant closed eyelid made from clay bricks and straw. Inside, the walls are covered in linen sheets hung like scrolls. Each one bears a dream, handwritten, embroidered, finger-painted, even scorched into the fabric. One reads, "I was a crocodile with a sun for a heart. I blinked, and the river boiled. No one noticed." Another says, "She kissed my forehead and my ears filled with sand. I woke with a smile I couldn't remove." And another, embroidered in the most delicate thread, "I finally lay down in a field. No one looked for me. No one had to." You ask a woman tending the scrolls what the purpose is. "We archive what the kingdom deletes," she replies. "They destroy sleep. We preserve the debris." Historians still argue whether the blink ever truly existed or if it was a metaphor invented by insomniacs to comfort themselves. Some claim it was a mirage, conjured by mass hallucination. One fringe theory even suggests the blink was a reverse curse, a place where dreams gained physical form and could only survive by being remembered collectively. You don't know what to believe. You only know what you feel. And right now, you feel like you're standing inside someone else's REM cycle. At any moment, the curtains could lift and reveal not townspeople but selves, splintered versions of those who walked too far into sleep and stayed. You sit beneath one of the veils, the air warm and thick with possibility. A cat curls up beside your foot and begins to purr low, rumbling white noise. You close one eye, just one, and you see something, not quite a dream, more like a memory you don't remember having. You're floating above the Nile, stars flickering in reverse. Someone hums a lullaby your bones recognize. You feel light, disconnected, safe. Then, just as quickly, it's gone. You open your eye. The cat is still there. The tent is still silent. But you understand something now. The blink isn't just a place. It's a permission to stop pretending you're stronger than your need, to stop flinching every time the body begs for softness. A final curtain ripples behind you. On it, painted in uneven strokes, is a phrase that loops around itself like a snake eating its tail. When the waking world becomes the lie, we lie down. And maybe that's it. The greatest rebellion wasn't escape, or defiance, or noise. It was this, lying down, and meaning it. You walk away from the blink, though it's hard to say whether you truly leave it. The fabric of the place feels stitched into you now, like it left behind a thread somewhere deep in your chest. You head back, toward more familiar ground, closer to temples, to records, to the illusion of clarity. But now, you're seeing things differently. You arrive at a low compound, nestled between two weathered cliffs, neither marked nor guarded. The only indication that you're in the right place is a barely visible symbol above the door, a stylized eyelid. The place is known, in whispers, as the archive of the unrested. The scent hits you before the door does. Dust, wax, faint ink, and the unmistakable undertone of tired bodies. Inside, the light is dim and golden, filtered through slats of carved stone. You pass shelves stacked with papyri, scrolls, tablets, and dodely bundles of worn cloth labeled with names and dates. An old woman greets you. She doesn't ask what you want. She simply says, "You've been collecting fragments. Now it's time to see the tapestry." You follow her through quiet halls where no one raises their voice. The walls hum faintly with the weight of stories. Everything here feels held together by tension, like a breath drawn in but never quite released. She brings you to a chamber unlike any you've seen so far. At its center, a long stone table etched with constellations. Surrounding it are figures, not statues, not exactly something in between. Preserved people, posed as if in mid-conversation, heads turned slightly, eyes closed. Each one wears a different headdress, a scribe's tablet, a farmer's sickle, a high priest's collar. These, the woman says, are the unrested. You ask if they're dead. She shakes her head. No, just unfinished. There's a nameplate by each figure, but the final one is blank. That one's for the first, who tells the whole story. She says, which isn't me. I've only heard pieces. She shows you the main archiver room of contradictions. Scrolls written backward, poems that begin with the last line, diaries where the handwriting grows messier the more lucid the writer becomes. One document catches your eye, a formal proclamation marked with the seal of a pharaoh. The language is cold and bureaucratic. Let it be known that sleep, being a distraction from duty and a gateway to false visions, is hereby subject to restriction. Those who indulge beyond sanctioned rest shall be deemed. And in the margin, a faint response in another hand. The body is not a criminal. The soul is not a traitor. The night is not a lie. That single phrase has been copied dozens of times across the room, carved into clay shards, inked into linen, even burned into the handle of a wooden spoon. You begin to see the shape of it now. This wasn't just about laws or health or devotion. It was about control, because a person who sleeps deeply is unreachable, unprogrammed. They might dream something dangerous. They might wake up different, and that was the ultimate fear. Not sleep itself, but what it might reveal. Historians still argue whether the anti-sleep laws were genuinely rooted in religious dogma, or whether they were simply a tool, an elegant method to keep minds bound to one reality. One fringe theory posits that dreamers began to organize, that they found ways to communicate across, using symbols and shared images to build a language the waking world couldn't censor. They called it the third eye, a network, not of spies, but of sleepers. The woman guiding you shows you a wall chart like a massive family tree, but instead of people, It maps dream motifs, a feather floating in ink, a window that can only open inward, a jackal with human hands. Each motif connects to dozens of others. Some lines fade into nothing, others loop and reconnect. At the bottom is a phrase: one dream does not defy the empire, but 1,000 remembered together. She lets you sit with that. You ask her, finally, how she sleeps. She smiles, guiltily, but deeply. You turn to leave, but she calls after you. Wait, you should see the last room. It's tucked away behind a linen curtain, the fabric faded and patchy with soot. Inside is a single bed, not ceremonial, not symbolic. A bed worn, lopsided, real. Above it, scrawled into the wall with a fingernail or perhaps a sharp stone: here, at last, I forgave myself for closing my eyes. You run your fingers over the etching. It's not ancient, it's recent. And suddenly, the centuries collapse. This isn't just history, it's now. And it's you. You step out of the archive into the hush of early evening, and the world feels like it's holding its breath. The stars are just beginning to emerge, tentative pinpricks in a purple sky, and you realize, with a flicker of strange certainty, that you've seen those constellations before. Not just in the heavens, but etched on the stone table, sewn into linen scrolls, whispered in dreams. You begin walking again, though there's nowhere in particular left to go. You're not retracing steps now. You're circling, spiraling inward, towards something both vast and impossibly quiet. Your journey ends, or maybe curls, to a Porza, a small house built into a cliffside, half swallowed by rock. It's old, modest, the kind of place the world forgets on purpose. Inside, someone waits, an old man, skin like parchment and hands as still as statues. He gestures for you to sit. No words, no explanations, just presence. The room is sparse. One mat, one lamp, one bowl of dates. But the walls are covered in painted eyes. Not watching, not judging, just closed. You speak softly, unsure if this is a temple, a home, or a tomb. He listens. Then finally, in a voice like sand sliding off bronze, he says, "You've seen it now." You ask what it is. He smiles. "Sleep," he says. "True sleep, the kind that makes empires nervous." He tells you what no scroll dared write down. That long ago, in the early days of the pharaohs, there were those who believed dreams were not byproducts of sleep, but the source of reality. That all waking life was merely the echo of some deeper dreaming mind, perhaps divine, perhaps collective. And that to sleep deeply was not to rest, but to touch the original. That's why sleep became dangerous. Not because it was idle, but because it was powerful. You ask him why so few rebelled. He shrugs. They did, but not with blades or fire. They laid down. That was enough. He reaches for a thin red scroll and hands it to you. On it, only a single phrase: "The gods sleep, and we are their dreams." You sit with it for a long time. Then you ask, "Can I?" He nods, slow and solemn. "Here," he says. "You'll be safe. No one watches here, not even the eye." And so, at last, you lie down. The mat is scratchy. The lamp flickers low, and for the first time since this long journey began, you let your eyes fall closed, both of them, and you do not resist what comes next.